we don't need to get into all the details, but I'll say, in the end it works, but the trial doesn't happen until another, what, 4 or 5 years later?
Yes, the arrest happened in March 1968, and the trial started in January 1970.
So Joe Leone sat in jail for 2 years waiting for his trial.
And did he sit in the jail cell or in the jailhouse right down the block from here?
Jefferson County Jail, right within sight of here.
Isn't that something?
He was watching the police dive the Black River looking for the murder weapons from his jail cell.
And why are they looking in the Black River for the murder weapon?
Well, supposedly, I guess James Pickett told them where to look. Because, you know, everything happened because James Pickett opened his mouth. He told me that they weren't even looking in the right place for the weapons.
So he might have led them there just for the heck of it then, knowing that the guns wouldn't be found there because nothing was found in the Black River.
Nothing was found.
And supposedly, Leone is watching it from his jail cell. He's supposedly laughing at what he's watching.
Incredible. Now, there's some incredible things that we just learned recently. Here it is, we're sitting in Lower Court Street in October of 2014. Anytime anyone looks at the front cover of the book, if we just mentioned it, especially anyone older than 65 years old, knows that night and how infamous it was. But you, Dan, found out something that's not even in the book. It's an allegation. It's one of the elements that obviously can't be substantiated. But someone claims that the old Rotary gas station, which was right next door, might have been the resting place for the weapons.
I was told that about a week ago at one of our book signings. It was a gentleman that appeared to know a lot about the case. He knew the Egans, he knew Joe Leone, he knew Pickett. He told me that's where the murder weapon ended up.
Inside the gas tank?
Inside the gas tank.
Now, obviously the gas station is no longer there. I'm assuming the tanks may not be there. But let's just say someone decides to exhume the old gas tanks. Maybe we can find 2 pistols under there.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Well, we have a cast of characters. We have a lady of the night who's like 70 years old, who is not only a prostitute but runs this little burglary ring because she knows the insides of a lot of houses. She tells the Egans where to go and what to steal. So there's a conspiracy there. Her younger husband is alleged to have been one of the shooters. Of course, we've talked about Joe Leone, who ultimately goes on trial. A couple years later, he actually witnesses the police at the Black River, right at the base of the jailhouse. They're looking for these pistols. Of course, Mr. Pickett said that they might have been there. Joe's laughing, saying they're not there. There's other stories even to this day suggesting that the pistols were locked or were dropped inside a gas tank right next door, which was the Rotary gas station. But on top of all that, we have F. Lee Bailey. He comes up here in his Learjet for the prosecution.
The county paid him $3,000 to support the use of the lie detector test in the trial against Joe Leone. Now, this was in a preliminary hearing prior to any trial, and despite Bailey's testimony, which he pointed out how he uses the lie detectors for his defendants, his clients, the courts ultimately threw out evidence from the lie detectors, as well as from evidence gained with from the bugging of the Belcher house.
And this is before the trial that starts.
Before the trial.
Why does it take so long for the trial to start?
They had about 3 different hearings, I do believe, over the term of the last year or so. And of course, Judge Wilsey, the county judge, Milton Wilsey, threw out most of that evidence which we just discussed. But then it was appealed. There was evidence, both the defense and the prosecution were trying to get back. So it was brought to the higher court in New York State, and ultimately to the New York State Court of Appeals, the highest they could go in New York State. So you had a continuation of court hearings before they could go to trial.
When is Joe Leone officially acquitted?
The trial was in January, and the trial was, what, a couple weeks maybe? And
yep.
So he's acquitted in January.
In about 2 hours. The jury was at about 2 hours.
You would think a triple murder, especially by today's standards, and we've seen it before in high-profile cases, even lesser charges, where there might be just one murder or no murders, would go a lot longer than that. So is it because everyone kind of didn't care about the murders? Is that why the trial was delayed so long, and that's why the acquittal came so quickly?
It's hard to say.
Basically, the prosecution had lost their key evidence, and you know, I suspect that maybe the prosecutor maybe he didn't go down hard enough on Joe Leone in cross-examination from whatever testimony we could unveil. But I think McCluskey's hands were tied before he ever stepped foot in that courtroom.
She had 3 children. Apparently they were unruly. The kids were part of a shoplifting ring, so they weren't the most reputable family by any means. But again, on the 31st, she was responsible enough to actually at one point have all 3 kids in the car. But before leaving this restaurant or this block to go up to the rest stop off Route 81, she drops the 3 kids off with either her mother or someone else that night.
She dropped 2 of them off at a babysitter, and she dropped the other one off at her mother-in-law, Leona Egan, the Egan boy's mother.
And she still has her dog. Was it her dog or was it?
Yes, it was her Pekingese Queenie.
And any reason why? Did she always have a dog?
Apparently, they also had a pet monkey in their house. It was running loose and crapping all over the floors. The kids were filthy, never took baths. The mother didn't change their diapers. They were running around with soiled diapers.
They'd be running around outdoors in soiled diapers.
And people who knew Barbara as a young student in high school were quite surprised because she used to take care of her father's house and was always clean. And yet, obviously, because of her involvement with Peter, that all changed. It's also alleged because Peter was on painkillers that she was involved in narcotics and using narcotics as well.
Yes, that's what we hear. Peter was probably given morphine or something like that for his amputation. Barbara soon started indulging in the drugs.
And this is a long time before, abuse of drugs was commonplace.
Right.
So,
They were probably Watertown's first junkies.
now, guys, I got to ask you. You were in first grade and you were in high school at the time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Now, you remember it in first grade. Is that right, Dan?
I do.
What do you remember?
I remember being scared to death. It was hit pretty close to home. Everybody was scared. It was the talk of the town. We were 30 miles away in Redwood. There was a lot of repercussions in Redwood. This was before we knew Joe's involvement in it.
And when you found that Joe was involved in it, you knew him because he was, again, the bread man.
Yeah, that was pretty creepy there.
And did you ever see him after that other than pictures in the paper?
It was the last time I saw him. I saw his pictures in the paper, and that was it.
And Dave?
I do not honestly recall knowing about it when I was in high school. That doesn't mean I didn't, but when you're in high school and you're involved in school activities, I guess you're not too much concerned about what's going on in the world around you.
But later on in life, Dan, of course, moved from Redwood in the 70s. He moved down to, at first, Tennessee and then to Kentucky.
Right.
But you were, can I say you were obsessed with this case?
Yeah, I still followed it through the years. My grandmother, her sister, was married to a man in Watertown who was distantly related to Joe Leone. So, I'd always keep up with my grandmother, keep updated on everything.
And then you started researching it.
Right.
But you needed the glue.
Right.
And the only reason why I say that is because you have a retired Watertown Daily Times writer here that had written a book before about a notorious murder in Jefferson County as well.
Right, and that's why I contacted Dave Champagne after reading his Stain in Her Blood, the Irene Isaac story. I wanted to get a hold of him and see if he would collaborate on this book.
Now, there's 2 things that connect the 2 murders. One, they both took place in the 60s. And the other fact is they both took place on Route 81. Isn't that strange?
Well, that's correct. I mean, Irene Isaac, actually, the state trooper who followed her that night actually first came upon her when she was in the rest area, which the police have come to call the Egan rest area, the same rest area where the triple homicide occurred.
So she stopped there at the same rest area.
Yes.
And then something goes on there. It is alleged that maybe he made a pass at her?
Well, officially the word is that he accused her of speeding. Later on he changed his story about the speed, or that she was speeding at all. He followed her up to the toll booth for the Thousand Island Bridge. While she was talking to the toll gatekeeper, he crossed the bridge, and so he was on Wellesley Island before she was, and then he's the guy who discovers her body on Wellesley Island.
Boy, the irony's there. Not to mention, if I'm not mistaken, someone else was hit by a vehicle on 81 on the Bradley Street exit
Joe Leone.
Joe Leone's father was a construction flag man, and he was killed at that Bradley Street exit.
Amazing. Well, I'm just very glad that you guys got together and collaborated on this. What's the response been so far since you've been at all these book signings recently?
Huge is the word I'd say, and,
Yeah.
and we have met a lot of people who, in some manner, they were involved as neighbors, work colleagues, relatives, you name it. We've had so many people tell us what they know about the Egans or Joe Leone, mostly the Egans.
And what's been the response to you?
Several relatives have come forward. I've actually befriended some of them on Facebook. And we've met two of Joe Leone's cousins, and we met James Pickett's daughters. It's overwhelming.
You know, it's really neat because just last week when we talked in this very restaurant here, now called Frida's, we had the opportunity to go across the street to the old stomping grounds where the Egans hung out. It's now called the Hitching Post, and it's owned by a Pickett. Hopefully we can speak to him as well about all this.
Right. Cliff Pickett owns the bar. He's the cousin of James Pickett. And Joe Leone is Clifford's godfather.
We were standing there looking up at a digital photo that would change from one picture to the other, and sure enough, one of the photographs is of Joe Leone.
Yeah.
So he has since passed on, but a lot of him, and for that matter, the Egans, a lot of their history, for better or worse, exists right here on Lower Court Street.
After the book went to press, an attorney contacted the History Press to say that somebody wanted to be interviewed about the case, and what we ultimately learned is that he's representing one of those three sons. We were told that one of the sons is now deceased, and we were told that after the murders occurred, those three sons were given protection under the witness protection program, given new identities, new names, and relocated. And now this one son wanted to get his story out, and he actually probably wants to do a book of his own.
Really? Is it as a result of this book that he wants to do a book of his own?
Yes, correct.
Unfortunately, they were innocent victims. Obviously, they weren't being raised correctly, and at that point, it was a reckless household. So that's what led to why a lot of retailers didn't want the Egan family to even walk in their place. But that wasn't by any means the blame of the three children.
Right.
That's for sure.
Well, guys, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to meet me here. I know you're retired and you don't live here, but the book signings have been doing really well, and we welcome both of you home for all of this. And this book obviously is on a lot of people's minds, and it's certainly on mine. I want to thank you, Dan, for being on my radio show as well, and for coming down here and talking with me.
Thank you.
They actually do some stakeouts. Long before the days of real investigating, they really didn't know what they were doing. In fact, they went into someone's house to plant a microphone, and they didn't have the staples and the staple gun to plant the actual microphone onto a sofa. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the investigators are Ray Paulette and Charlie Donahue. Ray Paulette is still living down in Florida, and he told us how they were using Donahue's staple gun, and they were planting a bug beneath the couch. They pulled the fiber out and planted the bug, the microphone, and started using the stapler, and lo and behold, it was empty. So they actually had to leave, go over to Donahue's house to get some staples, and then come back. And of course, they're worried about somebody's going to come home. But in the return trip, they were still able to complete that job and get out of there.
And which house was this again?
Well, it's a neighbor's house. It's not identified whose, but it's about a block away from the Belcher residence. Well, the bug was in the Belcher residence.
And that must have been interesting because, like Dan said, Bertha was a lady of the night, and here it is. They're bugging the apartment, and they heard some of the Johns obviously.
Oh yeah, Bertha had her lovers. There were some guys that really told her how much they loved her, and Ray and Charlie are hearing this conversation and getting some good entertainment about it.
That in itself is a story, but again, that's what the police obviously had to, I guess, through a matter of elimination, say that Mr. Belcher was perhaps not the trigger man that night because he never went to trial.
Well, the reason he didn't go to trial is because he was in prison and was ruled criminally insane, and so they had a warrant for him. The warrant got dropped.
And Ganoski was just an
Joe-
older gentleman.
Joe Ganoski was, yeah, he was older than Peter. Yeah, he was a military veteran, retired, and like we said, his place had been ripped off, burglary, and he supposedly put out the word that if his money isn't returned to him by the end of the year, Peter's a dead man.
So let's maybe put two pieces together here. The Leone family, Joe's family, is robbed on December 20th, 1964. A family heirloom and a lot of cash. And plus, you know, Joe Leone knows the Egans and he feels betrayed by this. Then Ganowski probably approaches Joe and says, hey, he stole money from me too. So I give you money to set up some type of scheme to get these guys in a situation where you can take them out without anyone knowing. Is that a good allegation?
It's certainly plausible. We don't know. We don't have any first-hand information that says that there was a scheme involving Ganoski.
Ganoski was never arrested or never charged. He was a spectator in court every day during the trial.
And was not called to the witness stand.
And why is that?
McCluskey?
We wish we could ask McCluskey. We wish we could ask Paul Shanahan. I mean, I would have thought that Shanahan would have put the guy in the stand.
And who's Shanahan?
Paul Shanahan was a very prominent attorney in Syracuse at the time, and he was the defense attorney for Joe Leone.
And how does the Leone family afford an attorney like this, an upstanding, probably expensive attorney?
I was told that it broke his family paying for his legal defense.
But did he also realize that this was a high-profile case? He was a young attorney. He'd get a lot of attention doing this?
Well, Shanahan wasn't a young attorney at the time. I mean, I don't know if he was in his maybe 50s, but he was already prominent. Mm-hmm. He'd already had his share of prominent cases down in Onondaga County.
So this guy was not cheap, and like you said, Dan, this cost the family quite a bit of money to defend their son Joe.
Right.